Hello, my name is Myra Stotesbury, and I am from Durham, North Carolina. And today I will be talking to you all about environmental injustice in low-income communities in Durham, North Carolina. In 2015, a group of professionals ranging from all kinds of different backgrounds, from geography, design, urban planning, economics, sociology, political science, law, philosophy, and environmental science, came together from different professionals from Duke University, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and North Carolina State University. They came together for a roundtable discussion on the environmental injustices happening in low-income communities around the Triangle area. The main goal for convening the roundtable was to facilitate an interdisciplinary conversation about environmental justice research, to provide an opportunity for the participants to share their work, to foster potential collaborations between those who teach, study, or otherwise engage in environmental justice issues, and to build community around environmental justice at Duke and area universities. To push the research community to new areas of environmental justice, the roundtable focused on 3 prompts. 1, what are the most important unanswered questions in empirical research on environmental justice? 2, what are the prevailing policies and strategies from addressing and readdressing environmental inequities and justice? How should we assess their efficacy? And 3, what are the most effective means for creating research projects around environmental justice that will generate both new knowledge and investment in communities? Participants discussed how environmental injustices stems partly from a couple of different things. First, they discussed unequal access to information. For example, individuals searching for affordable housing in our area might move somewhere without knowing the environmental hazards of that area or that community, because that information is not very public. It's not given to everybody. Income constraints may force individuals into a living situation in a hazardous environment. There may not be other options in their price range other than places that could be in hazardous environmental situations. Another group discussed how income in the community can influence policy. Where the money is, that's where the power is, and that's where the voices are most heard. So if only one group of people are having their voices heard, that could lead to food injustices and healthy food shortages in low-income communities, which is happening in Durham, North Carolina. They discussed limited information access to minorities and low-income people exposed to environmental injustices, which affects their access to healthy foods. For example, because of the lack of healthy foods in low-income communities in Durham, communities have started community gardens, which is, as you would think, a great solution. The community comes together and works to create healthy foods for everybody. However, without that information, that access to information, they could be putting their garden in unhealthy soil, in soil that may not be good for human consumption. Another group discussed timing and coordination in response to environmental injustices like climate change and non-renewable resources. This is a really big topic to discuss, so it was very vague in their research, and they mostly just focused on making sure that we acknowledge the cumulative historical hazards from different areas throughout Durham, which is typically where our low-income communities are being pushed into. Community participation was discussed as being super important, but people in low-income communities typically aren't going to talk to researchers. They don't feel comfortable with that, stemming from the fact that they don't feel heard. Our society and our research typically puts value on quantitative research compared to qualitative research. So they like to look at numbers or very statistic based research community. So that can lead to low income communities feeling unheard. Like, what's even the point of talking to this researcher about our living situation? And they also discuss a possible participation fatigue, being exhausted of having to stand up for yourself over and over again because nobody else will. This lack of true representation relates back to information access and incentives that cause information to be kept separate and privileged. One participant discussed that the government should look at and try to figure out how to measure levels of happiness and quality of life in our communities. So those were the things that were discussed in the roundtable discussion. This roundtable discussion from Duke University led me to reflect on the lower income community in Durham, North Carolina. Today, our country is experiencing climate change. On the West Coast, there are a lot of fires pushing people to move more inward. Even here on the East Coast, our sea level is rising, pushing people from the coast to move inward to communities like Durham. Same thing for big companies like Apple and Google. Apple's plan to build a $1 billion campus in the Research Triangle Park is beginning to set in for communities in North Carolina, especially Bull City. Apple is expected to create at least 3,000 jobs in the area. Google said it will aim to add 300 more employees next year and 500 more in 2023. The site will eventually support more than 1,000 jobs and be one of iCloud's top engineering hubs. More jobs for Durham is a huge plus. However, this is causing a huge increase in our housing market and a high increase in high-rise apartment buildings being constructed in our downtown area, forcing the lower income community out of the city where there's public transportation, healthy food options, access to information and resources. The median home price in Durham has increased 5.9% in the last year, along with rent prices increasing 2.2% in the last year. This is driving the working class, specifically African Americans from the inner city, by skyrocketing property tax, influx of new homes that are not financially affordable to the low-income community, and also neighbors who no longer look like them. Which leads me back to the roundtable discussion of the low-income community, such as food injustices, unequal access to information, income constraints, and a lower quality of life. When I went out on my first week, I decided to go to the Rocks Nature Preserve on Ellerby Creek, which is a beautiful place. Very secluded in nature. It started as someone's backyard that they started to preserve and form into this beautiful park. And I remember the houses that were right outside that park. And now those houses have been purchased by big companies and torn down. These nice single family homes, affordable family homes were torn down. And in their place, these giant, I mean giant, modern homes are being constructed and sold for way out of their price range. On week 2, I decided to go to West Parish Street, which is more in the middle of downtown Durham. It's also known as Durham's Black Wall Street. And downtown, you look around and you can count like on more than your hand how many construction sites are building apartments, high-rise apartment buildings, and these apartments sell for thousands of dollars a month. That is very much out of the price range of our low-income community. I started to feel kind of helpless when I started to think of these issues, because it starts with climate change. And climate change is such a big issue and something really big to think what one voice could do. Same thing with taking on big companies like Apple and Google. It's hard to wrap your mind around what you can do about that. So the more I went into my research, the more I found organizations like the North Carolina Environmental Justice Network, which is a grassroots people of color led coalition of community organizations and their supporters who work with low-income communities and people of color on issues of climate change, environmental injustices, racial injustice, and social injustice. And this really, it gave me a lot more hope. It made me feel like, okay, there is something I can do to help the people in these low-income communities, because climate change and taking on big companies, that's a lot for one person. But if I could use my voice to make a difference for just one person or a group of people in our low-income communities in Durham, then that's helping. That's using my voice to help the situation. So my proposal is to build our own environmental justice network. North Carolina is a whole state. We need a Durham environmental justice network to reach out to our low-income communities and our people of color to make sure that there aren't environmental injustices happening in Durham. These are my references. And I really enjoyed learning more about the history of Durham and what I can do with my voice to make a difference in my community. And I hope that you will share these hopes and these realizations along with me in building the Durham Environmental Justice Network. Thank you.